Hey, Stevie Taylor here. Welcome to episode 42 of the Gig Life podcast. If it's your first time to the podcast, welcome. Nice to have you here. Have a good look around and hope you can stay a while. If you're returning, as always, nice to see you back. So if you really dig the podcast, please tell your friends about us. Jump on your social media and, share a link or something or share an episode. If you want to talk to me, pretty easy to get hold of, to be honest. You can hit me up on Facebook or Instagram, The Gig Life Podcast, or you can send me an email at thegiglifepodcast@gmail.com. This episode is brought to you by Cuzzy T Urban Apparel. Tall tees, long sleeves, polo shirts, hoodies and caps. Locally owned, affordable, premium quality, fresh designs. Check out the Slick As online store at www.cuzzyt.com. That's C-U-Z-Y for Cuzzy. And a brand new shop is now opened up out at Parkley Markets every Saturday and Sunday. So go check out Cuzzy T, where you belong. My guest today is Jade Macrae. Jade is a singer from Sydney, currently touring the world with renowned American guitarist Joe Bonamassa. Born into a very musical family, music was obviously everywhere, which led her to start playing piano at the age of 3. From there, she's attended the Conservatorium of Music. She's backed artists such as Jimmy Barnes, Chisel, Renee Geyer, Neil Finn, amongst others. Had a very successful solo career, recorded 2 previous solo albums, reluctantly became a TV celebrity. She's hit the highs of the highs and the very lows and everything in between. I'm very excited to bring you this one. So, ladies and gentlemen, please be seated for Jade Macrae. Cheers. All right, I think we're rolling. Hello, Jade Macrae.
Hi there.
How's it going?
Very well, thanks.
Good. Welcome to the Gig Life podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Sweet as. You're back in town for a bit.
I am.
You're currently touring all over the world with some guy called Joe Bonamassa or something like that. Some guitar
some guy
dude.
thinks he can pick up a guitar here and there.
Yeah.
It's been great. I've been working with Joe for on and off since 2015, but the last couple of years, almost full-time touring. So it's been amazing. We're just about to take off on a European tour and playing some pretty epic shows there. We have 3 nights in a row at Royal Albert Hall in London.
Really?
And
wow. Have you ever been there before?
I actually have played there once before with him already. Right. So now I'm like, back there, back at just
that old place.
Popping in there again. Yeah, exactly. Which is ridiculous. It's such an iconic venue. And the first time we played there, Mahalia Barnes and I were doing the gig. And we looked at each other after a couple of songs and both of us just were like, is this even happening? Is this real life? And there have been a lot of moments like that working with him. But,
that's great.
Yeah, but it's really nice to be back in Sydney just for a minute. I love getting back home when I can.
Yeah, but you're just saying to me before we went on air, you've jammed too much in.
Well, I'm doing it to myself, I'm a sucker for punishment. But I guess when I go away, I leave behind, a lot of friends and family here. And most of my time is spent overseas now. So when I'm back for a week or 2 weeks, I usually try to cram in as much social and as much, music work at home as I can, which makes for a hectic time. But it's also really kind of a nice full time for the heart and everything. So
Yeah,
it's good.
yeah. And maybe if you had come back and not had all that stuff to do, you might leave going, I should have done that when I was home.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey. Yeah.
Yeah, you feel like you're missing out when you're away a bit. So it's nice to squeeze it all in.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, let's roll right back to how it all began for you. You've got very musical mother and father.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about them.
Okay. Well, Mum and Dad are both from New Zealand.
Yep.
And
what part of New Zealand?
Well, Dad grew up in Auckland. He born in Onehunga, and my mum's from the very, very far north, just outside Kaitaia, a tiny little village called Ahipara. And so they grew up over in New Zealand, and they met in Auckland in the 1960s, very early, or maybe even the late 50s. And they sort of were sweethearts right from then, and have basically been together ever since. And that's a long time ago now. So that's pretty amazing, I think, to have made that work for that long.
Yep.
But Mum's a singer and Dad's a piano player, and that's how they met, was through music in a jazz club. And, they both had very sort of diverse and interesting careers as individuals and together as collaborators.
Right.
So they moved from New Zealand to Australia for a little while, and then in the mid-60s moved over to America for a while, and Dad became the piano player for the Buddy Rich Big Band while they were there.
Really?
Yeah. And
wow, man.
They both just sort of really started to hit their stride and pick up a lot of session work in the States, and then decided to move over to the UK in the later 60s, I think. Oh, no, maybe still mid-60s. And they spent almost 20 years there, based in the UK, where they were doing a lot of touring work and also a lot of original music work, so sort of balancing both of them, and worked with, there's a big list of people, and I'm probably going to miss out some of the key ones, but Mum worked a lot with people like Van Morrison, Rod Stewart for a long time, Cat Stevens. Dad produced a lot of music for Scott Walker. He played with a lot of people who came through the UK. He played with Chet Baker, Clark Terry. Dad was the MD of the comedy, British comedy show, The Goodies.
Was he?
Yeah, so he wrote a lot of that crazy, silly music with Bill Oddie.
Yeah, yeah. And
so they did a whole bunch of different stuff, and then they also made their own records, which were sort of in the it was the 70s, so a lot of it was sort of funk or crossover jazz, and Dad was involved with some much more experimental music at the time, sort of psych fusion and all sorts of stuff. So
right.
They've had very
Frank Zappa sort of type stuff.
Yeah, more instrumental really, right. But playing with some of the guys from, it's more obscure music, but from Soft Machine, and he formed a band called Matching Mole with some of those guys, and also was involved with another band called Nucleus, which is from that same sort of 70s fusion psych kind of scene. So they've done, and I mean the list of their musical sort of adventures goes on and on and on. But they've done lots of different stuff, and now we moved to Australia. I was born there, and we moved to Australia when
So you were born in the UK?
Yeah. Yep. We moved out here in 1985 when I was 5. And I basically, most of my memories are here in Australia.
Yep.
So
I was going to ask, do you have much memories over there?
A little.
Yep.
I always feel some sort of weird connection with the UK when I go back there. Some sense of home or familiarity. But most of my life I've been here in Sydney, and I spent about a decade living in Melbourne as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah. They're still playing and singing now, Mum and Dad.
That's awesome.
Dad did 5 gigs in a row last week, and he's just turned 79. So it's pretty awesome. They're a real inspiration both.
Yeah, that's cool. That's impressive.
Yeah, so, they're both still super active, writing music, still playing live, and still sounding amazing. And I actually got them involved in an album that I'm still completing, but started last year. Yep. And they were amazing. They were so great to have involved, and, it wasn't an act of charity to have them there. It was, I had them there for what they had to offer, and they just sounded great. So,
yeah.
Really fun to collaborate.
Yeah. So when did music start for you?
Well, I we were talking about this morning actually. Apparently, I started sort of leaning towards the piano around 2 or 3 years old. But you know how much a 2 or 3 year old can actually play the piano is, you know, it's questionable. But I did love music from a really young age, and I was playing properly by the time I was 5. And then
lessons type stuff.
Yeah. And then I just loved it. I think Mum and Dad were also very mindful of not being sort of pushy stage parents, but always gave my brother and I the opportunity to do stuff if we wanted to, if we sort of naturally, went there ourselves. So I'd started with the piano and then started playing the violin when I was 8. So those were my main 2 things. And I sang in a choir for about the same age, from about 8 or so. But I never, I was really shy. I didn't really enjoy performing as a young person. And all through high school, I wanted to sing. I started to sing solo a little bit, but I was very shy and self-conscious. So it wasn't something that came. The performance aspect of it wasn't something that came supernaturally. I mean, I loved it for the music and stuff like that, but getting in front of people just was always terrifying. So,
how did you overcome that?
I think it's still a work in progress.
Okay.
But like anything, the more you do it, the easier it becomes.
Right.
And so, I mean, don't get me wrong. Sometimes I'd have an absolute ball being on stage these days. But I think that's just a personality thing as well. Everybody's different. And I seem to be a little bit of a mix there, because I certainly enjoy being the center of attention at times, as a lot of my friends will attest to that. But then I also can be, quite shy as well. So I don't know. It's a strange combination of things, but I definitely have a more sort of introspective side that that's not always comfortable, I think, being like that with an audience, So I guess when I was about 18, I auditioned for the jazz course at the Con here in Sydney. I went to high school there, and so I was finishing up high school, and I knew that I didn't really want to carry on with the classical music that I'd been studying, not full-time or professionally, and that was really mainly because I could see how much work was required to really make something of that is just very extreme, and the discipline required is really extreme, and I knew that I didn't have that in me really. So I foolishly thought that jazz was going to be way easier. And so I auditioned for the jazz course at the Con as a singer. And it was one of my first sort of, ventures into thinking, oh, maybe I could be a singer. And I got into the course, which was a surprise.
Sorry, explain how did the audition go? The process.
I can't. Oh gosh, that's a long time ago now. It's more than 20 years ago. But I believe you just had to prepare a couple of pieces. Yeah, I think I prepared 2 things. You had to improvise, which I'd had a really solid foundation in harmony, learning about harmony because of the school that I was at. So it was more, obviously everything at the Con more came from a classical standpoint, but I guess the combination of having my parents and having that as a foundation at school, I had a pretty good grasp of classical and jazz harmony already. So, improvising was never an unnatural thing for me. I guess my dad is, pretty amazing, masterful improviser, and it sort of removed, I suppose, the mystique of, oh gosh, that must be so hard. It was just always something that he just did it. And I guess I just thought, oh, well, that's just something you can do. And I didn't question that. And so that was probably a huge, I've never even thought about this, but that was probably a huge bonus for me, because I know for a lot of people, the idea of any sort of improvisation, whether it be in music or just generally in life, having to do something on the fly can be really frightening or, very daunting. So I guess, having that feel like something that was always possible was a huge advantage that I had from a young age. But the audition, I had to improvise, and, I think we had to do some sort of ear training test, like recognizing some chords or something like that. And I think that was basically it. But it was tough because they weren't really wanting to allow singers in the course at that time. And the argument was that the course wasn't really set up for vocalists. And truth be told, it wasn't really set up for vocalists. And so me and another girl actually got into the course that year, and we were the first ones to be allowed into the Bachelor of Music course ever. And we found that we got put into classes where there was no vocal part. You just sing one of the horn parts, which, was really useful as a tool for learning, and not super practical in terms of being able to use that outside of, in real life, but having to sort of use your brain in a different way like that was great. And for the first time I had a singing teacher as well, which I'd never had, and I got sent to Kerry Bedell, who's since passed away, but was an amazing teacher.
Right.
And she was very tough, really hard on me, but really, really, really great influence at that young age.
Yeah. Sorry about the whippersnipper too, by the way.
In case everyone doesn't know, we're having this interview in a very lush setting outside by the pool. And
recently built.
Yeah, recently built,
yep.
Beautiful deck area. And
I've been looking forward to having the first interview out here.
Yeah, with the peace and quiet.
And that guy out there who's got the whippersnipper, he mowed his lawn about 20 minutes ago, and I thought to myself, because you do your whippersnipping first.
Right, of course.
Like,
everybody knows that.
So anyway
thanks, buddy. It's all right. It's adding a little ambience.
Yeah, that's all good. Now, growing up with your mum and dad, were they giving you lessons?
Here and there, I'd have a lesson with mum.
Okay.
Like a little singing lesson here and there, but not really. I mean, but we sort of grew up in a house where mum and dad were both teaching at home a lot.
Okay.
And so we could always hear through the floor all the singing lessons coming up through the floor, every, singing drill, exercise, scale. And so even though if we weren't really taking the lessons ourselves, I mean, we were learning constantly just from hearing what they were doing with other people. And I was involved. Mum and dad still to this day run a little gospel choir called Jubilation. And so I would help out and be involved with that for quite a few years. So through that, obviously, learning by osmosis as well, for sure.
Yep. Yeah, awesome. Now, how long were you at the con?
I started there in year 8, so I did year 8 to year 12. Yep. And then
I didn't realise it was actually a high
it's
school.
very small. Like they have like one class per grade.
Right.
So, 30 kids max per year. So it's a tiny little school.
Okay.
But it was amazing going to school there. You're actually in the same building as the university, and you have access to all the teachers for the uni. We had a lot of extracurricular stuff like, orchestras, choirs, different chamber groups. Obviously a very strong focus on the music component of the school, but it was a regular high school as well.
Yep.
And you knew everybody in the entire school because it was so small. And I'm still close with a few people from the high school. Although it's interesting, not everybody went on to work in music at all. So that's sort of an interesting fun fact.
It happens, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I did 18 months of the Bachelor of Music course, and then I became a music school dropout after that.
Right. Okay. So during the high school part of it, was there a high school band type thing, sort of away from the con itself?
Not so much. I mean, a couple of people had stuff going on. And in my later years at the school, like year 11, year 12, they started to sort of have a little bit more sort of jazz content in the school itself. It was always surprising. I mean, the main focus was classical. So not many people had little sort of side projects on their own. But there just started, as I was in, say, year 11, to be a little bit of a sort of faction of students who were really into jazz. And they would sort of have, there was a handful of guys who are still working, really successfully now in jazz or in contemporary music. And that sort of all started in school on the side, just a little bit. But it was only a handful of people.
Right. Can you name a few of those people?
There's a couple of guys that spring to mind. Dave Symes, who's a wonderful bass player who I grew up singing with him in the Jackie Ozarski band for many years after school finished. And he is now, one of the things that he does is now the bass player in Boy and Bear, the band Boy and Bear.
Really?
But he's done, countless things over the years. Was MD for Sarah Blasco and Missy Higgins and all sorts of stuff, and a very successful jazz player as well.
Right.
Another guy who was in school, and we used to travel to school together every day because we both grew up on the Northern Beaches, was Kim Moyes, who's half of the Presets. So we sort of went, he was a couple of years above me and he was in school with me. They're the main ones that spring to mind right now, but there's a little pocket, and I think there's a couple of other guys. I think Harry Sutherland, who's a really great keyboard player around Sydney. He has a little project of his own called, oh my gosh, the name escapes me, Australian Athlete. Oh God, I can't remember. Anyway, something like that. Really cool synth project. But he's an amazing jazz player as well, like really has an incredible handle on the real trad style. Right. So it's really interesting seeing him go from that into this sort of like future synth, stuff that he's doing for himself. Yeah, super diverse guy. But yeah, there's a bunch of people. I can't think of everybody's names right now, but yeah, there's always a little bit of stuff bubbling up on the side.
Yeah. Let's talk about the dropout part. What was the headspace there? What were you thinking? This is not me.
Look, it was more, I started gradually over the first year to get little bits and pieces of gigs coming up. And one of those gigs was, as I mentioned before, excuse me, singing in this band with Jackie Ozarski and Tina Harrod. And, that working in that band was just an unbelievable education. Jackie was like a master arranger of the entire band, but, really had incredible arrangements of background vocals, which was mainly my role in the band, a few little features here and there. But that, I was starting to do work like that, and little other bits and pieces were just starting to come up, and I was working a lot, doing I was like, well, I'm doing what I want to be doing, and the study that I was doing, a lot of the information was stuff that I sort of already had under my belt. And I'm sure if I'd carried on, I would have started to, get into terrain that was new and unfamiliar. But at the stage of the course that I was at, it was all quite familiar already. And my thinking at the time was I wasn't a very good student. I was slack with attending. I was more interested in just playing gigs or having a good time. And I was kind of wasting my money really being there. And I'd always thought, okay, I'm just going to put this on hold, explore what's happening at the moment, keep up this live work and see where that takes me, and then I'll come back and finish the course later. So that was the sort of thinking at the time. And I've never gone back yet, but I might still finish it one day. I don't know.
So it's still open for you to do that, is it?
I don't know.
Okay.
I've deferred, so that's a good point. That might be cut off to me now, but I'm not, I'm not anti-finishing it, but at the time it just didn't feel like it was the right path for me, and I wasn't making the most of the course. Right. And, I obviously thought I knew better. and then
how old were you then?
I was like 19.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
You know it all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I knew much more then than I know now, that's for sure. But yeah, so I made the choice to quit, and then, things have worked out one way or another, so I think it's all good. I don't really live in regret of that at all.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So then what happened after the...
Well, I just started getting more work, I guess, and
with different bands and projects.
Heaps of different bands.
Okay.
So a couple of people really gave me a go early on, like Jackie, Rick Robertson, who's a saxophone player from Sydney, had a couple of different bands, Dig and Eon.
You played in Dig?
I wasn't in Dig, but I was in Eon.
Oh, right.
And so he gave me a lot of breaks when I was really young, and I really didn't know what I was doing at that time. So I was really lucky that, I think because of mum and dad, people were open to just giving me a shot.
Right.
And usually, even if I hadn't done it before, I figured it out pretty quick. So I kept, just building up that live work around Sydney, and then started to get sessions, and it was just sort of one thing after another. And I was also starting to write a little bit of music myself, but during that time I was like on a deep discovery of soul music, which was sort of...
Who were your people?
Well, initially, really, I mean, just simple stuff like, Stevie and Donny Hathaway. I had a really deep Donny Hathaway phase for sure.
I think I'm still in a deep Donny Hathaway stage.
Absolutely. That one's for life.
Yeah.
No doubt. But that was the first one for me. So it was like, I was just, obsessed. And, a lot of other artists as well. I really gravitated more towards the male singers at first. I don't know why. But they were my biggest influences at that time in those sort of formative years. And I was really going in on all that stuff. Also the JBs, James Brown and the JBs, and really sort of into that whole thing as well.
Now you mentioned James Brown. Mm-hmm. Where did I see
I did. I was lucky enough to meet him once.
Oh, you met him or you played with him?
Well, I opened for him on his last tour here in Australia.
Really?
Yeah, which was amazing. And we played the State Theatre, and we got to meet him very briefly and meet all the band, like hang with them for sure, and watched his whole set from the stage, from the wings and everything. And that was amazing. I was still really young, and that was during a time when I was really making pop music more than anything. So I was very lucky, I think, to get the gig. And in hindsight, there would have been far better choices probably to open for him at the time around Sydney. More funky choices anyway, in terms of the music that I was making at the time was much more straight ahead R&B. But I remember that night so clearly. I think we still represented ourselves really well, and we made our set as funky as it could be in that that time. But that was part of my roots too. So I guess, I was able to sort of draw on that a bit at that time. And
so what's he actually like?
Well, we had very little close contact with him. It was all very cloak and dagger, and literally cloak. Yeah, yeah. And he was very much protected from any contact with anyone. It was not long before he died after that. So, he was getting older and has obviously lived a pretty colourful life. So, we didn't look. It's not like we got to, hang out and have a deep and meaningful. Exactly. But, we were introduced, and his manager sent us a message at the end of our set, basically just said, Mr. Brown wants you to know that he really enjoyed your music and this and that. So, even that is really special.
That's cool.
Pretty cool. Yeah.
Awesome. Back to the influences.
Oh yeah. The influences. Well, I mean, obviously I went through that deep soul stage, but prior to that, I think my earliest sort of vocal influences were more in jazz, and funnily enough, they were female singers. So I really had a strong love for Sarah Vaughan. Dinah Washington was one of the first singers that I really, got into. And I remember when CDs first came out, I had a handful of CDs, and they probably speak a lot about who I've become. And hats off to my dad, because I feel like he was the one that went to the CD shop with me and bought these. So I had... I think it was the best of Dinah Washington. It was like a 3 CD set on Columbia, I think. And then I had En Vogue, Funky Divas, Prince, Diamonds and Pearls. There was a couple more. And
who's the woman singer on Diamonds and Pearls?
Rosie Gaines.
Yeah.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Awesome.
Unbelievable singer.
Yeah.
Unbelievable singer, yeah. Huge influence, and so much respect for her, gosh. Yeah, she's beautiful. But yeah, those, I mean, I think all of my listening was pretty diverse when I was young. And I had the radio and whatever was playing on Australian radio, which is not very diverse. But I also had a really strong love for, classic quality Australian rock music, I guess, and bands, that I still feel really connected to. Obviously called Chisel, In Excess, Dragon, technically maybe a New Zealand band, but all that kind of stuff really still resonates with me and is very nostalgic for me. And I had the chance to work with some of those people, so that was like, I remember doing a gig with when I was 19. I got booked for this background vocal gig. It was one of my first proper BVs gigs, and one of the people on that show was Ross Wilson. And Come Said the Boy was on the set list. And I remember the first time singing those woes. I'm sure you know the bit that I mean.
Yeah.
I was just losing my shit because I was like,
great.
it's just the best song. And, just pushes a lot of buttons for me from childhood and, really brings back so many memories. And I remember just pinching myself and being like, fuck, I'm actually singing it with him. Like, this is so cool.
Great.
So I would always love doing BBs, right from the early days. I love it. I love singing with other people, but also for me, background vocals offers, bring so much to certain types of music, and it's really fun to be able to harmonise.
Now, when did you decided you wanted to start doing the pop thing?
Well,
was that out of?
It sort of just evolved.
Yeah.
I wasn't ever like in my mind thinking, right, okay, now I'm going to go down this road and try and become a pop star.
Okay.
And if anything, it was more that I was pushed into that or guided in that direction, I guess, by some people that I started to work with. So at one point I ended up doing quite a few gigs, doing BVs for Renee Geyer, who was a huge influence on me and still a huge fan of her.
She's great.
Especially her early records I love very much.
Every time I hear Stairs and Whispers, I cry.
Yeah.
Oh, it's an amazing song.
Yeah,
Incredible.
she's an amazing singer. So that was another one of those moments where I got the call to go and do the gig, and I was like shitting myself because I got the call the day before as well. It was like the night before, and the gig was the next day. And I mean, thankfully, I knew a lot of the stuff just because I'd listened to the albums that many times.
Yeah.
But still, I was really young when I was 20 or something. So super nerve-wracking, but very educational. She's not an easy person to work with sometimes. But it was still great, really great for me, and very much a learning curve. Anyway, so I'd been working with her, and then sort of one thing led to another, and I'd been working alongside the Dolly brothers here in Sydney, Clayton and Lachlan, both amazing keyboard players. And, the sort of scenes started to sort of join up, and the dots started to join up, and Clayton asked me to come along and sing one night with his band and sit in with his band. And that night he'd also asked another friend of his, Jimmy Barnes, to come and sit in, as well as Jimmy's daughter, Mahalia. So that was a huge night for us because we all met that night. Right. Me, Mahalia, Jimmy, and it was at the Civic. And we all sat in and sang together. And then a couple of days later, Jimmy called and said, "What are you doing this weekend? Come on the road." And so I did it. And that sort of was the beginning of a whole chapter for me of a long period of work with Jimmy, which is still ongoing here and there. And, that family have been incredibly generous to me. And basically, we are family now.
Yep.
And my relationship with Mahalia is a very special one. But it was around that time that I met a man called Michael Hegarty, who was Jimmy's bass player and still is now. And he was starting a label, and he'd sort of heard me sing a little bit. He'd seen me with Renee, and he basically said to me at the time, he was just like, I love what you do. I love that you're really soulful. I'm starting this label, and we'd love to work with you. And that's when we started to put together my first sort of record, and and he was unbelievably supportive of me in developing me as a songwriter, as an artist, and facilitated some incredible opportunities for me during that time.
Yep.
And
this was your self-titled?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So that all started in the early 2000s, that relationship, and then that album I think came out in 2003 or something. So yeah, we spent a couple of years. I mean, they sent me around the world numerous times to work with amazing songwriters and put me just in some incredible situations, which you sort of dream about. And I mean, doesn't really happen in the same way now. There's not really that same sort of investment in young artists. You're expected to just do it yourself now.
Yeah, that's it.
You do go ahead and make your album, make your own video, put it out, and once you've got a following, then a label will maybe get on board. It's complete opposite of how it used to be, which is fine. I mean, it's just the way things are right now, but I feel very lucky that I sort of grew up in a time where people were, I guess the state of the industry was such that they could still spend money on developing young artists and give you those opportunities that are so beneficial to you when you're just learning, and you're also protected as well. You're not, you're very vulnerable, I think, when you're first trying to put yourself out there as an artist, and that gives you the tools to, having that support around you helps to develop the tools you need to, to survive all of that stuff, and, being in the public eye and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
It just reminds me, Natasha Stewart told me a story about when she had her...
Love Natasha Stewart, just saying.
Cool, man.
Yeah, great girl, great singer.
Yeah. She and her band went to Nashville to do like a showcase, and they thought they were showcasing, their songs, and what it actually ended up being was a whole panel of people who would come up to them at the end and say, "Well, if you pay me this much money, I'll take you to this part of your career." And man, it's
sort of like a conference, basically, so people can pitch themselves at you.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I like what you do, and if you pay me...
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've
Did you
been in those circles
a
number of times, different things. And especially these days, I think there's more and more of that, there's these big showcase sort of festivals that happen around the world, which are, don't get me wrong, they're amazing opportunities for people to play and be seen. But a lot of the premise of that stuff is the other side of it, like you're describing, where there are countless, PR people, marketing agencies, managers, all these things. And they're sort of hungry to try and align themselves with someone who looks like they're on the rise and maybe has a little bit of money to spend on a PR campaign, perhaps, So there is that whole sort of other side of it, which I think when you're ready for that and it's going to be that, it's fine. That just is what it's business. But when you're sort of fooled or lured into something thinking that, here we are, we get an opportunity to play in front of all these industry people. Yeah. When really all it is a chance for them to pitch themselves at you, not the other way around. Yeah, that's
what
exactly. It's
like they had no idea. They thought they were actually
totally. It's like no one needs that.
Yeah, cool. So okay. So you released your self-titled album. So how did that go?
Well, I think looking back, it went really well. I got a couple of big award nominations for ARIAs for the first album, and that was a time when there was virtually no, at the time they were calling it urban music, but there was no sort of R&B or soul or hardly a little bit of hip hop, but hardly any. Virtually no R&B here in Australia being made here. Yep. And I wasn't the only one at the time, but I'm one of only a handful of people who were really trying to push that in the mainstream. And it was hard. It was very difficult to get any radio support. We had a decent amount of support with one single, So Hot Right Now, still my most well-known song, which makes me laugh because I always thought it was kind of like a silly throwaway song. But yeah, it's that was an amazing time for me because I did get quite a lot of critical acclaim for the album. It was a lot of hard work to try and get any traction here in Australia, and that's not even just something that's exclusive to R&B or soul music. It's just hard here. Music is not as deeply a part of the culture here as it is in other places in the world. But overall, that first album I think was really well received and set me up, I guess, with a place in the industry here, and garnered me a lot of opportunities to perform as well, which was amazing. Did some amazing shows and big sports events and stuff like that, which is just totally thrilling doing that stuff.
Did you end up touring the world a bit with that stuff as well? Was it more
really
more local?
It was more local. Yep. I mean, we had a little bit of opportunity of stuff overseas, but it was quite difficult to break. And unlike now, where everything is pretty much global because of the internet. I mean, we had the internet then, but it wasn't playing anywhere near as much of a part as it does today. Yep. So when that album came out, it was CDs. It was still all CDs. iTunes existed. Napster was around at that time. Yep. So the internet was just starting to become an influence on how things played out. But it was really more about physical sales, like selling actual CDs. So we did okay on that front. Not amazing, but we did okay. And I toured here. I never did my own headline tour of Australia, but I did a couple of really big tours. The Guy Sebastian first tour when he was on Idol. Yep. Nelly, a few other people, John Legend, quite a few people around that time, and did some great shows and had a lot of fun with that. And after that record, I mean, that's where things really started to, we collectively decided, I guess, to really push things more in a very pop direction. And I'd been to Sweden a couple of times and written with some sort of Swedish producers, and things definitely moved away from this more soulful element that I think I had on my first record. And the second record that I made was also done during a time where I was working on TV a lot. And my whole career sort of started taking this other direction.
Was that because you weren't up to battling your urban music?
I don't know.
Were you getting a bit burnt by the knockbacks? And
I mean, that's exhausting.
Yeah.
You know, continuing to try and fight when it doesn't fit, it just feels like it's not a natural fit for here.
Yep.
What's really cool is that there's some really, I mean, that scene now here in Australia is really starting to flourish. But I feel like it's taken that long. This is like 16 years ago, you know, and it's taken that long for things to establish. But back then it was hard, and I don't think it was a conscious choice of, I'm over this, I'm going in this direction. But certain opportunities present themselves and you make your choice in which direction you move. And I'd had these, you know, offers to do these TV shows, and there's also the element of survival. It's like, you got to support yourself somehow, and so you get an.
Is that shows like Idol and?
Well, I worked on a show called It Takes Two.
Oh, yep.
And I did 3 seasons with Channel 7.
Okay.
So that was basically full time. You're there. I lived here in Sydney for the most part, but I'm down in Melbourne 4 or 5 days a week shooting that, and so that. You know, the first season came around and it seemed like a great opportunity to get in front of a lot of people on TV. And I was working on my second album, and, you know, we all decided, okay, well, surely this is going to be a positive for your music.
Yeah.
You know, millions of people are going to see you on TV every week. And what happened was interesting, because my profile certainly got a huge boost during the TV work. What didn't happen was it did not convert to any music fans at all. So if anything, my music audience sort of, I feel like, went down with the second album. I had nowhere near as much traction with the music, even though I was on, you know, prime time, like, you know, our ratings busting TV show, you know. So that was interesting. And after the third season, this is when Dancing with the Stars was still on. Before, now it's back.
Yep.
But I got asked to do Dancing with the Stars, and it was at that point that I'd put my album out. It had done nothing. I'd done 3 seasons of this TV show, which landed me in a world which felt very contrived. You know, reality TV is very produced. It's not much to do with reality.
Yeah.
And I was just exhausted by that. I was exhausted by this sort of phony representation of reality. And I didn't want to do another TV show. And so I turned down Dancing with the Stars, and that was a real turning point, because it was my first step away from that very commercial space that I'd ended up in. And my feeling at the time was that I'd become a celebrity instead of a musician. And I didn't want that. And if that meant taking a hit financially, then so be it. So I actually really retreated at that point. I stopped recording anything for quite a while. I split ways with my label at the time, stopped doing TV. I mean, I was still performing, getting, you know, various gigs, and that slowly sort of dwindled away over a year or two. And I just sort of, at the time I was married, and I sort of immersed myself in my husband's work. He was an artist as well, so we collaborated quite a lot. And I just sort of took a break from putting myself out there, and I was quite burnt out.
Is this the shy girl coming back?
Maybe. Yep. I think more than anything, though, I was just a little bit defeated and had, you know, I needed time as well to regroup and go, well, if I'm not doing this, then what actually do I want to do? You know, sometimes you need to step back and take a minute and zoom out and try and figure out where the next where the next steps might be. So yeah, that was sort of in the late 2000s that I really took myself out of the spotlight and tried to figure out who the hell I was again.
Did it affect you much mentally?
Oh yeah, totally.
Okay.
I mean,
almost to a depression type.
Oh, totally. I mean, anybody who has put themselves out into the public eye and has spent, numerous years at whatever level, like, in the public eye and being scrutinized, which is what happens when you become known. It can be incredible, but it can be really difficult as well. You're constantly there's a demand of you all the time. Nothing becomes personal. Everything is public. It puts a huge strain on any like personal relationships that you have. Mm-hmm. You have no time like to look after yourself, all that kind of stuff. So it's hard to keep a balance. It's hard to stay healthy. And then if you're a creative and you're expressing yourself and then, sharing that with the world and then not being able to have a connection to that from anybody, that's hugely depressing. But I mean, it also taught me a lot of stuff about I'm a chronic pleaser. I've always been a pleaser from when I was young. And so part of what I was doing at that time was really trying to make something to please the world, to get that validation from your audience. And I mean, the critical lesson I learned through all of that is that I needed to come back to a place of making music or whatever I was creating, doing that for my own satisfaction. And then if that's achieved and you get it, and somebody else, feels that or, enjoys that, then that's just a bonus. So that was sort of where I was working towards at that point, but wasn't there yet. But that was a huge turning point at that time.
How long had you pulled away for?
I spent a couple of years without really putting myself out there. I still worked and played live to support myself, but I didn't completely recluse. But I stopped producing any music. I stopped writing, and I just focused on work with other people. And
I was going to say, were you performing live as solo or?
A little bit of solo work, BV stuff, stuff alongside Harley when he was doing Phrase at the time. So we collaborated a lot. I helped him co-write one of his albums as well. I was still, I guess, feeding my creative side in a way, but I wasn't putting myself as a person out there into the world at all. Yep. Yeah, at that point. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So when did you start seeing a bit of light at the end of that tunnel?
Well, I guess that's a complicated story, but I think it was around 2012, something like that. I started a project called Dune.
Yep.
And that was my first little foray back into making music. And it was much more experimental than anything that I'd done publicly before. I'd sort of discovered this love of old analog synths and a lot of old recording equipment, built a studio. A lot of this was in collaboration with my husband at the time. And we sort of got right into the whole recording process. I learned a lot about engineering and started writing this music, which was much more production-based. It was much more musically abstract than what I'd done before. Not really abstract, but much more abstract than it was not mainstream pop music at all. So it was sort of like indie synth soul, I guess, a little bit soul, but that was a really, really fun project for me because I sort of did that. I was like, I don't care what anyone thinks of this. I'm just going to make something that I find interesting, where I enjoy the process. And that was sort of my prerogative with that project. And we did one EP. I collaborated with a couple of amazing musicians from Melbourne, where I was living at the time. Luke Hodgson, who's a bass player and is still a very close friend, and Lee Fisher, a drummer from down there. So the three of us would play. We did a little, a couple of runs of tours and played live, just the three of us. And that was also my first time playing live playing keyboards and singing.
I was going to say, were you singing and playing keys yet?
Yeah, which I'd never done that before. And we were running a lot of loops and different things on backing track, and it was very textured music. So to play it completely live, I would have needed a huge band. And, you know, it was all self-funded, so there wasn't really the opportunity for that at the time. But that was, I guess, the start of me trying to make my way back. And I did one full EP, and I wrote a lot of stuff towards a full record for that project over the following years, which sadly never came to see the light of day because my marriage ended, and it had become, you know, it was my project, but it had become quite a collaborative thing as well, and I just couldn't kind of carry on with it on my own. Didn't feel like the right thing. So that was super sad for me because I'd really invested a lot of time and energy into it and felt like I'd made some great stuff as well. So it was really sad. That was one of the most sad things about the breakup of our marriage. But I guess where that ended up was, it took that was another shutdown point. That was another shutdown point. At that time, right. I couldn't even listen to music. It was quite strange. I couldn't listen to any music. It just would trigger me immediately. Any song would just set me off. I got obviously, it's a terrible time. Anyone who's been through any kind of breakup knows what that's like. But I couldn't listen to music. And then that went on for about 6 months. And then eventually, it was around the time when that Solange album came out with Cranes in the Sky, and not the current one, previous one. And it was around that time, and I remember that came out, and I was like, oh my God, I can listen to music again. And I listened to that whole album, like I laid down on the floor, just did all sorts of weird shit. But I kind of got myself back together, and then it was also around that time that I got the call to go on the road with Joe, who I had met earlier, done a little bit of work with earlier, but it was almost like, I don't know, just some sort of magical gift.
Perfect timing.
Yeah, where I didn't have a house. I was, back at mum and dad's. I'm still back at mum and dad's, but anyway. But I'd literally just had to move out of my own home, and I didn't have anywhere to go. I didn't really have any work. I'd sort of abandoned this project that had been my sole project for a couple of years. And then this gig came up, and I was like, do I want to go around the world and, travel, get to play live, see all these amazing places, even get paid to do so? And it was just like, it couldn't have been a better thing at a better time. It was amazing. So that sort of happened. And then over that first year on the road with him, I very gradually started to write music again here and there. And we got a great guy in the band. His name's Paulie Serra, and he's the saxophone player in the band, but he's also a great songwriter and singer in his own right. He's sort of like a little bit Ray Charles-esque, very bluesy, but great songwriter. And so he was really encouraging me to, get back into it basically, and started sort of writing songs on the road a little bit that year. And then I decided over the course of that year, I was like, right, okay, I'm going to make another record. And I'd sort of landed in this completely other world. I'd really gone in on this indie world with like all my synths and like all this sort of abstract music I was making. And then all of a sudden I'm right back sort of into my roots of like blues and, the music that I was starting to write was like, there were soul songs. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to make a soul record. And so last year, I sort of spent the first 6 months while we were on the road really, really pushed myself to write all the time. And because I'd been through a lot, and it took me a while to be able to articulate that in music.
Yep.
But once I started, I sort of just really went for it. And I was quite, I guess, reasonably prolific with the writing over a short space of time. And, our average day on the road is it's pretty cushy, our schedule.
Yeah.
Our call time generally every day is about 3:30 in the afternoon. So we sort of have the mornings to ourselves. And sometimes we have really late nights, so a lot of people like to sleep in, but I tend to get up early. And so I was just really trying to maximize those mornings. And so I'd get up every morning. I was also really trying to look after myself. So I'd be up, I'd try to exercise or do something healthy for myself. And I got a bit into meditation. And I'm a bit scatty for it. I'm still working at it, but...
I think it's a lifelong process.
Exactly. I mean, everybody says it's not about doing it perfectly, but I tend to be that perfectionist type. So... Anyway, I got into the writing on the road and then had 2 very short gaps from tour last year here in Sydney. One in September, one in October, and one was like 5 days and the next one was 4 days. They were ridiculous breaks. I realistically didn't need to come home, but I decided that I wanted to record. So on the first gap in September, I came back and spent 3 days, great studio here in Sydney called Golden Retriever, which is in Marrickville. And recorded all the songs with the band. I did all the lead vocals live with the rhythm section. And
all the finished vocals?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so we did all the final vocals just
that's so cool.
down, and we recorded everything to tape. And we did 14 songs in the 3 days. So it was a huge session for me. I'd never recorded like that either, which seems crazy, but I've got some birds happening.
Yeah. So, lorikeets.
But I'd never recorded live with a band, and you know, Mahalia has always recorded live with a band. She'd always told me, she's like, oh, it's so much better. You should just do it like this. But I'd always made pop music or R&B or whatever, where it's just sort of comes together in stages. You know, it doesn't all happen in one hit. So this was my first time, and I just couldn't believe how much more I enjoyed it, how much better I sang, just the dynamic of working with everybody and responding in real time. And also my band just played so great. And the band that I used are all musicians that I've really worked with since those very early days in the early 2000s, when I first started gigging in Sydney. They're guys that I've known my whole life. As I said before, my dad played all the keys, the piano and whirly stuff. So I was just sort of really in my, very happy place, having all these people who I'd known my whole life all surrounding me. And then on the next break in October when we came back, I recorded all the horns, all the percussion, and all the background vocals, which I had just this incredible dream team of singers join me. And again, just, people who I've sung with forever, and, we all can just sing together so easily because we know each other so well. So it was this amazing experience putting it all together, and I'm just about to send that all off for mastering. So
great! So it's mixed.
It's mixed.
Great.
And a guy called Justin Stanley mixed the album, and he's if you don't know him, he's an amazing producer. He's also the husband of amazing artist Nika Costa. So I reached out to him first, and I was so happy that he said yes. I'd always been a fan of Nika when I was really young, and looked up to her a lot. And I knew that he had this very intimate relationship with the, female vocal.
Yep. What sort of stuff had he produced or mixed before?
Well, what comes to mind? He's done a lot of different stuff, but recently stuff like Jamie Lydell. I think he worked with Prince. I don't know his CV off by heart, but many people, yeah.
Sorry, that's the gum nuts.
Oh, it's the gum nuts.
Yeah,
I was
the
like,
bloody
what is
things,
that? Anyway.
It's all happening out here.
It is. We're out in nature. I like it. But yeah, mainly I wanted to work with him because of what he'd done with Nika, and I knew that he would have a really cool sort of take on the style of what I'd made, which is very old school. It's very 50s, 60s. All the songs are really very much in that vein, and the way we recorded everything was very...
Did you record to tape?
Yeah. We recorded everything to tape. It's a combination of tape and digital.
Of course,
it came out of the tape and into the computer.
Yep.
And then, when we go to mastering it, it's going to go back into tape again. So
yep. That's
a big part of the sound. And I try to do a lot of it authentically. Things are different now to what they were then. So, I didn't do it in a way that was completely throwback, but I feel like we did capture a lot of sort of genuine spirit of that time in the way that we put it all together. And my friend Dave Symes that I mentioned before, the bass player, he came in and helped us out on the tracking days so that I could be freer to just sing and he sort of just helped me keep track of what everybody was doing and co-produced on those days, which was amazing to have him there again. Someone that, I mean, I went to high school with him and we've known each other for a very long time and worked together.
Yep.
You know, we learned how to play music together.
Yep.
You know, so it was pretty special having all those people around.
Yeah, great. Who was your band?
Well, the rhythm section was Hamish Stewart on drums, Jonathan Schwartz on double bass. So the whole record is double bass.
That's all double bass.
Yeah. Carl Dewhurst is on guitar. Clayton Dolly plays organ. And my dad on piano and whirly. The horns was James Greening, played trumpet and trombone. And Matt Keegan played saxophones. We had some Barry and some tenor sax on there. A very dear old friend, Ian Bloxham, played all the percussion. And he's someone I've known all my life. And he has a son my age who's also a very talented musician, Felix Bloxham.
I've heard that name.
Yeah, he's a fantastic drummer. He's done a lot of different stuff. You would have seen him around for sure. And who else? We had a great array of singers to sing on the album too. So my mum Joy. Mahalia was there. Juanita Tippins, who's my other friend that I collaborate with all the time. Prinny Stevens was there. We had Rebecca Jensen, Gary Pinto, Darren Percival and Mark Williams.
Yeah,
so
that's a super team.
it was a real powerhouse. And we did one song, a couple of songs that were like a big sort of choir section, and it just sounded unbelievable. I've got goosebumps now just thinking about it. It was really cool.
Yeah. So in picking that that bunch of singers, are you picking them for their certain? I'm speaking from someone that doesn't sing and have always been fascinated by harmony and stuff like that. You selecting them based on what their range is and how you want?
Yeah, that's definitely part of it.
Yep.
I mean, range is part of it. Everybody's voice sits more comfortably in a certain area. I think the biggest consideration for me was tone and phrasing. So, I wanted people who really understood that old school sound, as all of us do, because we all love it. But tonally, I really wanted some great texture to the sound. And so there's a couple of songs that ended up just being my mum, Darren Percival, Gary, and Mark Williams. And I just really wanted to go for a sound of it just being like really quite, I don't know what the right words to describe it, but not a clean, super nice sound. I wanted something with a lot of character, and my mum will have to forgive me for saying this, but something with a bit of depth and age to it too, and a contrast to my voice. Like my voice can, I'm always booked for the sessions where they need a happy voice. I just sound happy. I've got the happy voice. So I've got the happy voice, and I wanted something to sort of, counter that. And so when they sang against, my voice, it was just a great compliment because it had so much earthiness, so much texture to the sound, a lot of character, some depth. And you can't really emulate that sound of a long life in a voice. Any sort of artists who manage to sustain to an older age, you hear their voice and it carries so much in it that it didn't have necessarily when it was younger. It's like Aretha Franklin was always incredible, but she sounded like one thing when she was 18 and then later in life sounded completely different. It just has, those stories are all there. So for me that was a big consideration too. And I tend to be a bit fussy with phrasing and pocket. So everybody there was obviously very, very, has a very strong game across all things, but everybody was there for, their own special reason.
Did you all come together on those recording days and say, okay, guys, here are the songs? Or did you have them sort of prepped and you sent them back and go, we're going in, we're doing this? No one had heard anything when we got there. So, I mean, that's the other thing is with having singers of that caliber. Everybody can just work on the fly, and everyone has amazing ears and is very used to just going, you go here, okay, cool. And the other part of that is that we've all sung collectively in various different formations
for a long time. So you know the nuance of the next person. Gotcha. You're there, you don't even think about it, but your subconscious knows, you know. So, but none of it was rehearsed, and it was all just done on the fly. And we did 11 songs in one day. It was a lot, but everyone was amazing, just up for it. You know, they were up for it and sang so great too. It's like still one of my favorite parts of how it's all turned out for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So when do you think that'll be mastered and released even?
Oh, well, you know, it's a big push doing something on your own, and it's like I've sort of come full circle, and I'm having the extreme opposite experience of what I had when I was first starting out, where I had a lot of money being thrown at me and spent on me, and a lot of people doing stuff for me, to being one single person basically doing all of that stuff, funding all of it. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've had a lot of great support as well from my family and team of friends, but at the same time, it's a lot of work to actually get anything out there these days. And I'm also mindful I'm not in a crazy rush, you know. So once I get the masters back, which is soon, my plan today, this is where I'm at today, but these plans have become very fluid, it seems. But my plan at the moment is I'm going to try and get one song out before, like around the middle of this year. So try and push something out then. I've actually got a break from tour for the whole of whole of June and some of July. So I want to try and use that as a real focus period for myself, and get something out there in the world. And, you know, then realistically, I don't think the entire album will be out until next year.
Okay.
But hopefully, you know, a few songs between now and the end of the year.
Yep.
And then, you know, the whole record, you know, sometime hopefully early next year everything will be out. But it's a very different climate these days, you know. People, like it's old school even just to make an album now.
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
To make an album is like sort of a foreign concept. You just
you gotta believe in it too, and also maybe have that not that expectation, but think that maybe not everybody's going to hear a whole album, and be okay with that. I suppose.
Be all right with that, exactly. Yeah. But also, you know, it's important to, like, I want to try and connect with a new audience, reconnect with my old audience.
Yep.
And for me, I think the best way to do that at the moment is just to take that a little bit slowly, go song by song. You know, give people one song.
Yep.
I find, you know, most people's attention span these days is like lasts for about 30 seconds.
That's it.
Like literally. So they might love something for a second, but then it's on to the next thing because you're just flooded with constant stimulation. I mean, I'm exactly the same. So I think just to put the whole album out, you know, is kind of like, well, you're just still only going to get that 30 seconds for the whole album. So you may as well, you know, take it slow, get the music out there. Hopefully people respond to it and enjoy it. I'm trying to set up some gigs here in Sydney for when I'm back in June, and also down in Melbourne. So hopefully that all comes together in like mini little, you know, launch tour kind of thing.
Yeah. Thank you for the invite last weekend.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
Sorry I couldn't make it, but I'm a
You're a dad.
I'm a dad. I'm a soccer coach now.
Oh my gosh, even more full on.
Under 11 superstars.
Yeah, well, I know what kids sport can be like. It's serious business.
Yeah, it is. But
yeah, you know, it's been great. I've done a couple of shows here in Sydney over the last 6 months, and had such a good time, and such a positive response to all the new music, and just starting to reconnect with some of my old audience, which is really nice. So hopefully that just continues to build, and you know, we can snowball a little bit. And we have actually got some exciting shows booked in August. So Joe every year runs a cruise around, well, usually it's around the Caribbean in February, and leaves usually from Florida somewhere, in 5 days around the islands and then back again. It's amazing. But what it is, it's a blues cruise, and it's just basically 5 days of non-stop music, like a festival on a cruise ship. And the first time, I've performed on it a couple of times with him, and the first time I was sort of dreading it. I didn't like the idea of being on a cruise ship to start with. I just thought it was going to be shit, and then got out there and just had the time of our lives. The the lineup was really strong. So, there's 7 or 8 stages operating all day long, all night long. And, some from little sort of more loungy rooms to big, open air stages and stuff like that. So it's a variety of different settings. But great music at all times of day. There's big jam sessions.
Yep.
It was a great time, really great time. And everybody who gets on that boat, it's about 3,000 guests, but everybody who takes that trip is obviously super into music. Otherwise, they just wouldn't be there, So this year they're doing the first run at this around the Mediterranean. So I'm super excited to be playing not only with Joe, but me and my band are on the bill for that cruise, which is in August. So we go from Barcelona to Malta and to Monte Carlo, and it's like 6 days.
Far out.
Yeah,
Awesome.
super cool, and it means I can bring like mum and dad are part of the band, so they get to come and we get to have that experience together, and it's
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
Yeah. Let's talk about touring life a little bit. 'Cause I follow you guys on Instagram, and it looks like you have so much fun.
We do.
But there's also the other side of it too. That there would be the downtime, which you've made the most of by writing, and but tell us what it's like those times when it must get pretty low sometimes.
Here and there. I mean, I think my default is I'm most of the time a pretty optimistic person. So I think it's harder for some other people than it is for me. I find it easy to make a good time wherever I am.
Okay.
But boredom is definitely a factor at times. Some of the locations that we end up in are not very exciting, small towns, some pretty down and out towns sometimes, especially in America. Towns that have definitely seen better days, maybe not particularly safe either. So on a day, in our average day, as I sort of mentioned earlier, is, we're required to work from 3:30 in the afternoon. We go to sound check, we get ready for the gig, we do the gig. The way we travel is on a bus. So we travel at night. We finish the gig, and about 15 minutes after we get off stage, we're on the bus and we're driving to the next town. So those drives are anywhere between 1 hour, 2 hours, 18 hours. It just depends on the schedule. But a lot of the time it's about, a 4 or 5 hour drive. So you'll drive, and then at about 3 o'clock in the morning, you'll arrive at the hotel. We've got beds on the bus, so usually we'll go to bed, and then 3 in the morning, get up, go inside to your hotel room. And that obviously changes day to day depending on how long the drives are and stuff like that. But, sometimes you'll end up in a town that, doesn't necessarily have a lot to offer in terms of, sightseeing or activities or food or anything like that. And particularly in the States, it can be hard to stay healthy. It can be hard to find decent food during the day.
Right.
We're extremely well looked after at the gig. We have excellent catering, super healthy. But, it's some of those sort of, beaten down towns. It's if you've got nothing to do and you're just stuck in your hotel room, which is maybe not the greatest hotel room, then, that can get a little bit depressing.
Play some tricks.
Yeah, exactly. But, I mean, the one thing I will say is those times where we're not in a very nice place are pretty few and far between. Like, Joe is insanely generous with the way that he looks after us. So even in those towns, we're always in a decent place, and he sort of makes sure of that, and we're incredibly well looked after. So I'm just super thankful for that, because it's not like that for everybody. So he really values his whole team, and there aren't many people who are only there for a minute. It's usually, if you're actually asked to be a part of that touring party, you're usually there for a long haul, which says a lot about the way they run things and about everybody who ends up in that touring party. And it's like a big family, everybody, of course there are, different personalities and, differences of opinion and different, little factions within the group. But, we all basically live together for weeks and weeks at a time, and, really manage to have, for the most part, a great time together. So I'd like to say that, we have these down and out times, but I mean, for me, I've had nothing but a good time so far.
Okay, great.
And I guess that's why I'm still doing it. You know, this is my 3rd year with him almost full time. So I wouldn't be there if it wasn't great, you know, and the same goes for on stage too. Like he just delivers night after night, as does the whole band. You know, everybody has a moment here and there, but, you know, not much, not much. It's very consistent show. Yeah.
One of the first TV drummers I ever saw was Anton Fig.
Yes.
And I had his signature drumsticks and everything. This is when I was living in New Zealand.
Oh,
I
yeah,
used to watch
awesome.
him. Yeah, no, that's cool.
Yeah, he's great. Anton is a very funny man as well. He's got a great sense of humour. And he recently introduced me to some hilarious old clips of him on Letterman, which I think that was I was always too young when it was on. It was like on super late at night. Mum and Dad had us in bed at like 7 p.m. or something, so I missed a lot of that stuff. But he is very, very quick to make fun of himself. He's got a great sense of humour, and he did some hilarious stuff on Letterman. I think he showed us a clip recently where he wasn't actually real, but it looked very real. Ate the head off a budgie, like off some sort of parrot.
Was it Ozzy Osbourne on the show or something?
I can't remember. It was some sort of thing. And then apparently the next day they had all these letters of complaint from all these animal rights organisations. And so they had to go back and explain that actually that was a fake bird and fake blood and like do this whole explanation because there was all this hate mail coming in for Anton.
Yeah.
Which he's a very sweet man. He's obviously an extremely skilled musician and again super consistent on the gig, and the gig for him is extremely physical, and he's a hard-hitting drummer, and you know he's not getting any younger either, so I'm always amazed at his energy level, just being so on point every night, and just bringing that A game is pretty remarkable to me at that age. I mean, I find sometimes for me to maintain focus, if we're at the end of a long run and we haven't had any nights off in a few nights, it's hard to continue that concentration and get everything right and stay present, and so I'm always amazed at the other guys that, they're all getting close to or above 70. So not Joe, but the rhythm section. And so...
how old's Joe?
Joe's only, I think he's 41.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 41.
He was sort of child prodigy type.
Yeah. Thing, he's been active in his career since he was like 10 or something like that. So he's been doing it for a long time already. But, he's still a young man, really. But he would argue that he's an old man in a young man's body.
Right, yeah. He plays...
Oh, he's phenomenal.
Incredible.
Yeah, phenomenal. Yeah, really just beyond talented, just a freak. Yeah.
So he travels. So you guys travel on the bus?
Yeah, well, he has his own bus. The whole band are in one bus.
Okay.
The bus itself is a bit of fun. It's got a couple of different lounge areas, and the centre section of the bus is all bunk beds, and the back is the lounge, and the front is a lounge. The front's sort of got a kitchen and stuff. So, we've always got various snacks and breakfast stuff in the bus, and
so you have caterers on the bus?
We don't have caterers on the bus. That actually tends to be Mahalia and I. Okay. We do a lot of the bus catering for the band, but it's all just snacks for late night and breakfast if we're there in the morning and stuff like that. But we're again on that whole thing of being looked after. Anything, that we need, like if some certain person only has oat milk from this brand or whatever, like almost all of our sort of requests are accommodated. So it means that, you're not ever sort of feeling like really, you're not ever feeling so much like you're away from home either, because you have a lot of the stuff that you might have in your regular routine.
Yep.
And I think that really helps to keep everybody healthy for a start, and also just happy. You're not feeling sort of cut off from your normal life. You are to a certain extent, but having those regular things helps to maintain some sort of level of normality when you're away. Yeah.
Yep. So apart from yourself, Juanita, Mahalia, is the rest of the band in the States?
Yeah, they're all American.
Okay, yep.
So Joe loves Australia. He likes Australians too. His girlfriend is Australian. And the producer that he works with, Kevin Shirley, is based in Australia a lot of the time, and has had a lot of history here in Australia. So that it was via Kevin that the connection to Joe came about. Kevin knew Mahalia really well, and he thought that
Because Kevin's worked with Jimmy.
With Jimmy, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And so he thought that Mahalia and Joe would be good collaborators, and so they were introduced to each other, and then they made an album together, which was all the...
Joe and Mahalia did?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
This is a few years ago, so maybe 2014. And it was all the music of Betty Davis. Really interesting album, really great album called, I think it's called Ooh Baby. Ooh Yeah. Sorry, it's called Ooh Yeah. And worth checking out if anybody is listening. So when they made that album, Juanita and Mahalia and I did all the background vocals on that. And eventually Joe came out to Australia and we played 2 shows here to sort of launch that project. And that's when he met us for the first time. And, you know, Joe takes a long time to relax socially with people. So we barely got to know him at all on that trip. But about a year after that, Kevin suggested us for a one-off tour with him over in the States, which was going to feature the music of the 3 Kings, so B.B. King, Albert King and Freddie King. And they wanted to bring in this background vocal component to the band. And Kevin suggested us to Joe, and he thought it was a great idea. And so that was the first time that 3 of us girls worked with Joe for his stuff. And then since then, on and off, basically some members of us have been, apart from a short period at one point, you know, some members of us have been in the band ever since. Okay. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's great. It's really great. You know, so the rest of the band is from over there, and we've often sort of raised the point of like, you know, there are vocalists in America, you know, you could always pick someone else up. And they did try some other girls one time who were from the States who had come highly recommended, and I'm sure they were great singers, but for whatever reason, they were really not happy with them, and that it didn't work out. And it was, I think a lot of it is also personality. I think part of the reason why Joe likes Australians is because we're laid back, you know, and we get along with people easily. We just make stuff work. We don't play the diva card and make ridiculous demands.
Make things difficult.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I'm sure it's hard enough, eh?
Exactly. And, you know, he's got these sort of slightly crotchety old men in the band, and so I'm sure he's getting enough demands from them. Yeah. No, I'm kidding. They're all sweethearts, you know, they don't need any more sort of, you know, difficult personalities around. So I think that was a big part of why we ended up being back there and they didn't go with these other girls that they had. So
great.
That's nice. Yeah.
It's
and we're all, I mean, obviously we've all become good friends now too.
Yeah, awesome. So looking past, you know, this cruise you got coming up, what can you see in the next 12 months?
Well, I can tell you what I'd like to see. I really want to obviously get all the music out there. But really my vision for myself at the moment that I'm trying to manifest is I want to reestablish myself as an artist. I feel like I've really settled back into making soul music.
It's time. Yep.
And, you know, I've really sort of reconnected with music that's soulful and particularly now more blues influenced, and I'm sure that's partly to do with, you know, the work that I'm doing with Joe. But again, that feels very natural. And I really just want to keep pushing that and be able to balance that, obviously with the work with him, which I'm completely enjoying and I don't intend to give that up unless I get the axe. And, you know, really just try to get myself back in a position where I can be performing my own music, you know, at least, you know, half of the time, and doing that in a way of quality as well. You know, I don't really want to do stuff where I pick up bands in different cities. Like I love the band that I'm working with at the moment, and as far as is humanly possible, I want to try and just keep that as a unit. Particularly while my parents are still around. You know, my dad will be 80 next year, and these opportunities to collaborate the way we are not going to carry on forever. And so I think for this period of what I'm doing, I want to retain that as much as possible and keep that going. And I can see how it really energizes them as well. So that's a big part of the picture at the moment, is trying to, you know, make the most of this sort of family connection that we're having. And yeah, just really, you know, I really just want to keep that rolling, and I really would love to establish that overseas is really my main focus.
Yeah.
Because as much as I love being here, the fact is, there's not a huge amount of stuff to do here as a soul artist. It's getting to be a little bit more easier, I think, a tiny bit, but there's just not a huge scene for it here in Australia. And whereas, once you've played overseas as well, you definitely understand that music holds a different part of people's lives overseas. There's that much more investment, into actually committing and immersing yourself in going and seeing someone live, not just whatever comes up on your Spotify. Oh yeah, this is cool. Actually going to see a live show and, and that being something that's just a huge part of what you might do every week is go to a concert, and obviously that, I understand people have, not everyone can go to a concert every week and everything costs money and all that kind of stuff. But I do get the feeling that overseas that's facilitated a little bit more as well, just culturally. It's not as easy here in Australia to go out and see live music without spending $100.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like it'd be great if it was, but particularly here in Sydney with all the lockout laws and all that stuff, it's just like we're the ones that sort of lose out, but also the public lose out.
Course, yeah.
Because they don't get to just go and consume great music,
and young musicians miss out too. Cause
exactly, they don't have
that
places
sort of to play anymore,
and the lineage. Exactly. So they don't have that, which I'm so thankful. Our generation was sort of the last one to have that privilege, and like be mentored by all those great players. And now, it's just a different culture. So, and out of that, other things are evolving. Like, it's not like everything's ending; it's just changing, and that's cool. But it's definitely different now. So, I think overseas for me, I really want to try and make that a focus for next year for sure.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, Jade Macrae, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Being on the podcast.
It's been great. I've really enjoyed our chat, I was going to say, but really I just talked the whole time.
No, that's good. That's what it's all about.
It's been great. Thank you for having me on.
And looking forward to hearing your new music.
Yeah, absolutely.
Following your travels with Joe and whatever happens.
Yes.
Awesome.
Lovely. All right.
Thank you, Jade.
Thank you.
Catch ya.
Bye.
Yeah.
So take this heart of mine. I promise I'll be there. And baby, please be true. And please handle me with care. Handle me with care.